What's better, a brand new Bedrock DLC that costs $10 or a classic Java mod that's still completely free? Yeah, the choice seems obvious, but things get a lot more interesting when you find out that Aether Legends was made by the same team behind the original Aether mod. So today I want to compare the new Aether Legends DLC with the legendary Java mod that started it all. We're looking at the biggest and most important parts: the structures, the bosses, the loot, and of course the unique accessories. But before we get into all of that, there is one important detail you should know first. The creator of the Aether now works at Mojang. This is King Bedrock. He joined the team in 2020, and since then, thanks to him, Minecraft has received the Deep Dark Biome, Striders, the Ancient City, and the Warden. So does he still continue developing the mod himself? No, his team handles that now. King Bedrock mostly just helps with advice. And right now work is being done on the second part. Has the Aether ever come to the Bedrock edition of Minecraft? Well, how do I put this? The trend of bringing legendary and iconic projects over the Bedrock edition has become more and more noticeable. For example, the Diversity map, or even full Tinker's Construct add-on. There are plenty of examples. In 2022, a project called Aether Dimension suddenly appeared on the marketplace. Many people thought it was an official port of the mod because it had almost everything exactly like in the Java version. But as it turned out, the creators of the original mod didn't even know about it. They weren't receiving a single cent from the sales. And it was especially strange to watch all of this happen, considering that the main creator of the mod works directly at Mojang. An investigation began, and the project was temporarily removed from the marketplace. But it never went to court. After Mojang stepped in, the two sides reached a compromise. The map was renamed to Aether Dimension. Yes, they simply removed the letter A, and some of the disputed elements were changed. And I'll say even more. In 2023, a direct sequel from the very same creators was released, but there were no more conflicts, because the original Aether team joined forces with one of the marketplace giants, Spark Universe, to create an official port and a kind of reimagining called Aether Legends. So what came out of it? Did it actually get better? I compared all of it, and I'm excited to share it with you. We all know that to enter a new dimension, you need to build a glowstone portal. Here, the principle is exactly the same. But while exploring the world, the player can come across ruined portals. Water flows out of them and some blocks are missing. It's basically a hint showing you what you need to do to activate the portal. In my opinion, that's a really good design choice. After teleporting, we are greeted by the wonderful new world of this paradise-like dimension. At first glance, it seems like nothing has really changed. Everything looks exactly the way it used to. But as soon as you compare it to the mod, you immediately feel the difference. Of course, there isn't much point in simply saying that this DLC has new block and item textures. What matters to me is the actual content, and this is where things get a little more complicated. In the Java version of Minecraft, the mod generates a different dimension every time, depending on the world seed. Here, however, it's a dynamic world. In other words, this dimension was pre-built. It will be the same for everyone. So why didn't they make it work like Java? Because Bedrock simply doesn't allow something like that yet. That's exactly why when I first entered the new dimension, my FPS started dropping fast. The world had to load properly before it stopped lagging. We'll still have time to talk about the mobs and items, but first, let's head to the first boss, and at the same time, the first dungeon. Just a reminder, in the original mod there were 3 bosses: the Slider, the Valkyrie, and the Sun Spirit. Let's probably start with the very first one. The Slider was found inside the Bronze dungeon. Yes, the structures where the bosses were located had rarity tiers. The Slider was bronze, the Valkyrie was silver, and the Sun Spirit was gold. The Bronze dungeon was the easiest one to find. It generated underground, and its entrance was… well, how do I put this? It existed. It was easy to miss, kind of rough, and not especially logical, but it was there. The structure itself was divided into several small rooms, each with a chest in the center. It could either be a loot chest or a mimic. In other words, instead of a chest, the player could run into a mob that would try to eat them. Another threat in this place was the sentries. They would rise out of the ground, chase the player, and could explode. At the very end, the player faced the first boss, the Slider. It doesn't attack first, and you can only damage it with a pickaxe, because it's basically a giant block. The main mechanic of this boss is that it only moves in straight lines, so the player has to move diagonally. After the victory, the boss disappears and leaves behind a reward chest. So what awaits us in this DLC? Here the bronze dungeon is definitely much bigger. First of all, it's very hard to miss, because it has an absolutely massive entrance. At first it almost looks like some kind of temple, but once you go a little deeper, you realize it's actually a giant labyrinth with lots of different rooms. If you come here for the first time, you might think this place is pretty safe, but in reality, these completely ordinary looking cubes are the very same sentries. Only this time, just like their ancestor, they move in straight lines and chase the player, trying to knock them down onto the stalactites. And trust me, they keep chasing you even if you fall, so it's better to destroy them right away. In each room you can find amphorae. Most of the time they contain food. There are also regular chests with different loot, but the most interesting ones are the locked chests: bronze, silver and gold. By the way, these can be found throughout the entire dimension, in all kinds of structures. To open them, the player needs to find the matching key. Keys can drop from almost any mob, from amphorae, or they can be found in those regular chests. The loot in locked chests is much better, but of course, it's not that simple. Remember that mimics from the mod? These chests can turn out to be mimics too. Like I said, this structure is full-on labyrinth, and at the end of it, the player has to reach the main boss. What I like is that there are some obvious paths forward. For example, sometimes you need to climb up a little to continue, but there are also much more questionable ones. For example, you might have to jump into water, then swim through murky water to reach a new room. Sometimes rooms have floors with holes in them and lava underneath. For a sentry, knocking the player down there was not exactly difficult. On top of that, there are hidden passages that lead to small parkour sections. Either way, if all roads in real life lead to Rome, then here they all lead to the slider. I don't think it's hard to guess that this is one of the easiest bosses. It mostly inherits its behavior from the original mod. After the first attack, the slider wakes up and starts moving. It still only moves in straight lines, but at the same time, it doesn't constantly try to attack the player. I'd even say it does the opposite. It tries to avoid you. It has two attacks, a knockback hit and the ability to summon fallen sentries. You'll have to chase the boss around the room, and for that there are air currents placed throughout the arena that launch the player upward. It's easy to follow them, so you have to be careful. On top of that, you can hit the slider with any weapon, but only on one of its four sides. The player has to break its ice, and that's how you destroy it. After the victory, the slider doesn't disappear. You could say it falls asleep, leaving behind it drops. These are ancient plates, which can be used to craft unique armor, and with a lower chance, an ancient shield may be dropped too. The special things about this shield is that when you crouch, the shield lifts up, making the player invulnerable. By holding the crouch button, you can keep charging a shield strike for a short time. Then, when you release the button, you unleash the energy and hit the enemy. As I already mentioned, the slider doesn't disappear. It goes on a cooldown, and after 10 minutes, a message appears in chat saying it's ready to fight again. You can start the fight again by using Ancient Relic on the slider, and so you don't have to go through the entire labyrinth again after winning. A shortcut back to the surface opens up. I wanted to talk about artifacts and armor, but as soon as I left the labyrinth, I ran into this big guy. This is a giant, and it's a neutral mob. You can find it almost all over the world, usually sleeping. If you wake it up, it will ask the player for some kind of valuable ore. It can be netherite, copper ingots, emeralds, and things like that. In return, it can apply a special enchantment to any non-stackable item. This enchantment is called Heartbound. So what does it do? When the player dies, items with this enchantment stay in the inventory and don't disappear. But if you hit the giant, it becomes hostile and attacks the player, so be polite. You'll probably be surprised, but this mod also has Leshy. These are fully hostile tree-like mobs that shoot darts from dart shooters. Yes, the same darts and dart shooters from the original mod. They are not dangerous, but they can definitely ruin your mood a little when there are a lot of them. I don't know if it's actually true, but it feels like they were inspired by the Cloaks from The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. If you've played it or even just seen them, you probably know exactly what I mean. Just to be clear, the giant and the Leshy are completely new mobs. They weren't in the original mod. Speaking of that, after defeating the slider, you could find a Valkyrie lance in the reward chest. Without it, fighting the queen boss is very difficult. Its main feature is attack range, but let's go in order. Finding the silver dungeon where the queen is located isn't actually that hard. It's a giant structure built in the style of an ancient Greek Parthenon. Inside, the player will encounter neutral Valkyries, who won't start the fight first, as well as many rooms with chests and mimics. You could say that the first half of this structure is a small labyrinth, but in the end it still leads the player to the Queen's chamber. The player's task here is to defeat at least 10 regular Valkyries and collect their victory medals. With those medals, you need to approach the Queen, present them as a proof of your strength, and begin the battle. My opinion, in the mod, the Valkyrie is one of the hardest bosses. She's fast, constantly attacks the player, and barely gives you a moment to catch your breath. Sometimes she fires projectiles, which can be deflected with a sword, but after a short time the projectile summons lightning. After the victory, the Queen disappears, leaving behind a key to the reward chest near her throne. So how is this handled in the DLC? Here things are a little different. First of all, while exploring the world, the player can come across a Valkyrie settlement. Just like in the mod, the Valkyries here don't attack first. The player has to provoke the fight themselves. But after you defeat one, the Valkyrie kneels and waits for the player's decision. If you spare her, she will drop that same victory medal for the player and stop fighting. If you finish the job, she dies and leaves behind golden feathers. At the same time, the Valkyries won't attack player even if, let's say, you rob their settlement, breaking amphorae and taking loot from chests. Once the player collects 10 medals, their task is to find the Valkyrie Queen's temple. It's very different from the settlement in terms of size, and it definitely looks bigger than the one from the original mod. At the same time, there isn't really that same mini labyrinth here. The temple is also kind of a Valkyrie settlement, just partly ruined. The main danger here, in my opinion, is the void, because you can easily fall if you fail a jump from one side to other. At the very top of the mountain, inside a huge Parthenon, she waits, the Valkyrie Queen. She sits casually on her throne, and everything about her says that she's bored. She is waiting for the one hero who actually worth of fighting her, and if that hero is you, then you're in for a very dynamic fight. The Queen is still just as fast as she was in the original mod. Her sword is extremely long and will reach its target without any problems. So the player will absolutely need the ancient shield that drops from the slider. It's genuinely overpowered and blocks almost every attack. Besides her regular attacks, the Valkyrie can rise into the air on her wings and throw feathers at the player. But her most dangerous attack is the sudden dash toward the player. It can break through even the shield, summon lightning and set the player on fire. After the victory, just like the other Valkyries, she kneels and waits for the player's decision. And this is where things get tricky. If you spare the Queen, she gives the player the Valkyrie horn. Its special ability is that it can summon 2 Valkyries, an archer and warrior, to help the player. It's useful, but the cooldown is a full 5 minutes. But if you kill her, she drops her sword after death. And in that case, though, how can I put this? The Queen will take revenge. Sometimes, while traveling, the same Valkyries will suddenly attack the player who killed their Queen. So the choice is yours. By the way, the sword is worse than the Gravitate sword in terms of damage, but it does have a bonus charge attack that can break through shields. On top of that, the sword has a longer attack range, just like in the original mod. And that brings us back to the mod. Because the last possible dungeon is next, the hardest and the most serious one, the Gold Dungeon. Inside we face the Sun Spirit who has enslaved the day-night cycle. Overall, this is the most serious dungeon. It appears very rarely in the game, but it's not hard to notice. It's a floating island made of spheres, with those same amber trees growing on top of them. To start the fight, you first have to listen to dozens of threats and speeches about how strong and powerful this boss is. The fight with the Sun Spirit is very long. You get locked inside a small room with no way to escape. The Sun Spirit starts flying around the room like crazy and throwing fireballs at the player. You can deflect them and they bounce off surfaces. Sometimes, instead of a fireball, the boss shoots ice. The ice projectiles are very fragile, but you have to try to deflect back at him. Then he freezes and you can damage him. But at the same time, he also summons a minion that attacks the player. After the fight, he leaves behind a key to the loot chest and the Sun Altar, the very block that lets you choose the time of the day in this dimension. So what does the fight look in this DLC? I'd say it's completely different. Let's start with the fact that they created a separate biome for the Sun Spirit's temple. It's a desert. Yes, it may not look like one at first glance, but it really is. To me, it honestly looked more like the Nuke map from the CS 1.6. This biome is filled with the Sun Spirit's followers. For example, there's the Sun Follower. It's kind of like a flying creeper. It throws fireballs at the player and then explodes at the end. There are also dust wraiths, which can suddenly burst out of the ground. And the last one is the Sun Warrior, a huge golem that sets things on fire every time it detects. In the very center of this desert stands the massive Sun Sun Spirit Temple. Moving around it is a real pain, because it's made of tiny islands with a void underneath, and there are whirlwinds everywhere, constantly trying to throw the player down into the void. At the top of this temple there is a castle, and in it the very same Sun Spirit awaits the player. In my opinion, this is the weakest fight of them all, just like in the original mod. The whole catch is that the fight starts suddenly. The Sun Spirit appears and his power is being fueled by 3 crystals. Until those crystals are destroyed, he is immortal. So first, the player has to destroy the crystals, and only then fight him directly. The fight itself is very much in the spirit of the mod. The Sun Spirit moves from side to side, sometimes attacks with a fireball, sometimes even with a whole barrage of them, summons his followers and tries to avoid your attacks. In my opinion, it's a bit boring, considering that he's supposed to be the main boss of this dimension, the one who enslaved the day and night cycle. Speaking of that, after the victory, he can drop either the Sun Altar or the Sun Staff. The first one, just like in the original mod, can set any time of day: eternal day, eternal night, or the normal day and night cycle. The Sun Staff is something new. It's a new type of weapon, and when activated, it can launch those same fireballs. On top of that, you can control them by aiming at the enemy. And that's where the main dungeons end. But there are still other things we can compare. In the original mod there were many accessories: rings, glows, pendants and cloaks. You could equip them in a separate menu next to your character. Most of them were useless. For example, rings and pendants were just visual additions, but there were also things like the invisibility cloak, which made the player invisible, or the Valkyrie cloak, which gave the slow falling effect. There were also other accessories, like an orb that lets you breathe underwater for longer, a regeneration stone that helped you restore health faster, or a shield that blocked almost all projectiles. So overall, most of these items were actually very useful in gameplay. The DLC didn't forget about this aspect either. Since Bedrock doesn't allow adding new slots to the player, they decided to cheat it a little. They added a separate item, the artifact menu. At first glance, it looks just like a mirror. You receive it at the beginning of the game and you can't throw it away or lose it. When you activate it, 4 slots open up: cloak, glows, pendant and life shard. Let's start with the cloaks. There are 5 of them. The ancient cloak lets the player dash, the Valkyrie wings let you slowly glide downward, the cloak of Thelus gives you 3 extra jumps. By the way, Thelus is a legendary hero. The original mod has a very large and pretty interesting lore. Thelus was the one who defeated the Sun Spirit for the first time and trapped his spirit in a physical form using Ice Stone. That is exactly why he became vulnerable to ice, which we used during the fight in the original mod. The Blight cloak lets you climb walls. And the last one, the cloak of Arkansas, lets you become invisible, but with a certain cooldown. By the way, Arkansas is the creator god and the first form of life. According to the Valkyrie legends, he created the planet and the Valkyries themselves to maintain order. Despite his divine power, Arkansas was mortal. Yeah, the mod's lore is actually really cool. I recommend looking into it more. There are 6 pendants, and each one simply gives the player who equips it a certain effect: resistance, regeneration, haste, saturation or speed. There are also 5 types of glows, and these do the opposite. After a hit, they apply some kind of effect to the enemy, like weakness, slowness, levitation or inebriation. The warrior glows simply increase damage. The life shard is basically the same regeneration stone from the mod, but here it has as many as 10 tiers. So this smoothly brings us to a new mechanic in this mod: upgrading items. The thing is, in the original mod there wasn't a special altar. Essentially, it was a furnace powered by ambrosium. It could either upgrade blocks and items or repair armor, tools and weapons. In the DLC, they made a separate altar that requires the presence of ancient souls. They appear on their own near the altar after some time, and sometimes somewhere close to the player. When that happens, it's better to take a bottle and catch that mob for later, because their power is what fuels the altar. Every accessory can be upgraded on this altar. Each orc, glows and pendant has 3 upgrade tiers, while the life shard has a full 10. After placing the right accessory on the altar, it asks for a certain number of relics. This can be found everywhere and they are not hard to get. Once the player brings the required amount, the upgrade begins. And honestly, it looks really nice. Can this altar also repair armor and tools? No. For that, the player has to craft a mending brew. It can be made from Aether petal and blight form, which drops from cockatrice. That is a bit strange, of course, but the brew can only be used on an anvil, and it also takes levels from you. In my opinion, that kind of breaks the overall vibe a little. By the way, remember those cloud parachutes? When the player was falling down, they could activate one, and a cubic cloud would appear right under their feet, slowing the fall. They're not in the DLC. Instead, we now have the totem of unfalling. When the player falls from a great height, the totem creates a huge cloud right before impact, taking the fall damage from them. But there is one one downside: you have to hold it in your hand, just like a regular totem. What surprised me is that this dimension has, roughly speaking, villagers and villages, but of course in the equivalent of this world. Angel Gardens are a type of a village where you can meet angels. These are peaceful creatures you can trade with. Here's the interesting part: sometimes they can appear as a petrified angel statue. In that case, the player's task is to revive them using ambrosia. After that, you can trade with them just like with villagers. You can kill them, after death they turn back into petrified angel statue, and you can revive them again. As a payment, they accept Zanite. I can't show you anything like this in the original mod because it simply wasn't there. In the second part of the mod there are glint coins, which are meant for trading, but the mod only recently entered public beta. Content is being added as development continues, and for now there is nobody to trade with. Remember the clouds from the mod? No, not the vanilla ones, but the ones that generated in this dimension. When many players stepped onto them for the first time, they thought they would fall through, but the clouds actually held them. In this DLC, forget about that. As soon as you enter the cloud, it slows you down, but then you keep falling. To safely walk on the clouds, the player has to craft cloud boots. Only then will the clouds hold you up. Of course, all the mobs from the mod are here too: the flying cow, the fig, and the air bunny. You can also find cocoa trees and moa. Yes, moa can be tamed too. In the mod, the player had to craft a special block, the incubator. You placed an egg inside it and waited for the moa to hatch. Then it would grow up already tamed and you could ride it around. Here, the player first has to find a new mob, the golden goose. Just like a chicken, it can lay a golden egg. From that egg, you can either get a gold ingot or instead feed it to a moa and tame it so you can explore new areas. I also have to mention one really good new feature that could easily be added to the second part of the mod: the ivy bean. If you place it on a solid surface, it grows into beanstalk, which helps you get across to the opposite side. This is an excellent idea for a dimension like this. The stalk grows both in length and height, although it does have limits. You can find this bean by breaking grass or by breaking heart of the stalk. This thing is extremely useful. I think I've shown and told you enough. The DLC still has more unique mobs, structures, items and blocks, but my goal was specifically to compare, roughly speaking, the Bedrock mod and the Java mod. Overall, developers didn't lie. This really is a kind of reimagining of the original mod. Did they put it off? I think they did. The world is colorful, dangerous, and there's plenty to explore. But of course, the price holds it back. 1,690 coins is not something everyone can afford. What do you think about this DLC? Is it better or worse? Share your opinion in the comments. I'm sure both I and others would be interested to read it. And while you're waiting for the next video, check out these ones. They're just as interesting. Subscribe to this channel, leave a like and hit the bell. We'll hear from each other again, because we continue discovering Minecraft in a whole new way.